Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about inventory growth and the possibility of lower rates on the horizon. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
It is wonderful to be here, Sarah, and it's such a beautiful topic today. Is the housing market inventory finally balanced?
Oh, this is a great topic. We have been talking about inventory for a while. I feel like we were in that savagely unhealthy housing market for more than a year, and then we were like the savagely unhealthy housing market is back. We've done all this stuff, so this could be some good news. So tell us what you're seeing from the existing home sale report.
So this is the NAR data, National Association of Realtors. This is not ours. I have a model for their data, and I've kept it the same. Now, for people that might not be familiar with my work, I was not a low inventory person in the previous decade. I used to make fun of the low inventory people that said, "Oh, housing's not, home sales can't grow because there's nothing to buy." No, that's not how it works, right? There's plenty of days on market. Home prices weren't escalating out of control. We're completely fine. The sales demand curve looked perfectly normal. So in the previous decade, I always talked about, low inventory was a myth. There was plenty of homes to buy in the previous expansion. The days on market were 30 to 45 days they'd been coming down. So prices weren't going out of control. Nothing dramatic. But when 2020 came, housing broke out before COVID hit us. And then inventory broke to all-time lows. Okay, so that was a problem because of the inventory channels that we've always talked about here, right? Most sellers are buyers, inventory is a wash, there's 20 to 30% left. If mortgage buyers, first-time home buyers come in, it's hard to grow inventory. Well, not a lot of people knew that. So I went from, making fun of the low inventory people like, oh my God, we are in a bad spot now. So that's what an analyst is supposed to do. If the market changes on you, you go with it, right? And then you write up models or something to give some people some guidance. Because years 2020 to 2024 has the best housing demographic patch ever recorded history. We talked about that so many times when we first started working together, that it became a problem if inventory stayed low because too many people were chasing too few homes. So I said, I will feel better about the housing market when total active listings get back to 1.52 to 1.93 million, and we get 4 months of supply. Okay. So today we are at 1.32 million NAR data. We have over 4 months of supply. So we're good there. We're not back to where I would consider balance 100%, but with the month of supply there and inventory up, okay, we're in a much better spot. So we're almost back to what I would call a balanced marketplace for the nation, right? Of course, there's parts of the country, anywhere that's at 2019 inventory levels, we're pretty much set and okay. So in that context, what's happening this year is something I've been looking for a long time, right? The inventory growth. And look, home prices aren't crashing nationally. All these, the existing home sales market was another record low sales print, but home prices are at all-time highs, right? So I've come to realize there's very, very few people in this country that actually really track housing. So it might seem odd to a lot of people, but I was like, oh my God, we're getting there, right? And because inventory is very seasonal, the low points of the previous 10 years was 1.52 million. That's when inventory was at the seasonal low. So our seasonal peak kind of period is not back to the seasonal low. So we're not quite there yet, but we're in that direction. But the fact that we have 4 months of supply is a positive, right? It's no longer, 75% of the homes have multiple bids, prices getting out of control. So we are getting there. And this is why I love 2024. This is why when I give interviews, I'm very happy. I'm saying we're finally off of the areas where I was concerned the most, because the housing market is going to be here for another 50 to 100 years. It cannot operate in a functional marketplace when inventory is that low.
So let's talk about home prices, though. What did we see with the existing home sales report, and is that lagging? Does that look at the same as like what we can see when we look at the Altos data?
So we are ahead of everyone. So I'm going to give you a really good example. A few months ago, when Yahoo Finance interviewed me, the anchor was saying, Logan, why are you so convinced inventory is going to grow this year? And then I realized that we're like months ahead of everyone. So when we see the weekly inventory growing, right, and the price cut percentage is growing and the new listings data is growing, nobody knows that, right? Unless you read our work, you're like months behind. So when the NAR was coming and the seasonal inventory was starting, we're like, oh, inventory is going to grow this year. Yeah. So it's just that because we're months ahead of everyone, we know this is going to be the fact. So now that we're sitting here, the NAR is catching up to our data and saying inventory is growing, monthly supply is growing. So we got the 4 months. I'm going to whiff on the new listings call, but the 4 months worked. So home prices are hit all-time highs, but the growth rate is already cooling down, right? The first half of 2024, we had such easy comps. We've talked about this a lot, that it's going to show like stronger home price growth than what it is. Now all the low comps are gone. So the whole second half of 2024, the growth rate of pricing will cool down. Naturally, you have harder comps, and also inventory is picking up. Rates are still elevated. Mortgage demand isn't growing in any meaningful way. Those are areas where the monthly supply has been able to get to like 4 months. And think about this. We are sitting here in the third calendar year of the lowest home sales ever. We have insurance and property tax and taxes issues in Florida and Texas. And even with all that, even with mortgage rates going from 3 to 8%, we're nowhere back to the 5-decade average of inventory. And the days on market per the NAR report was, I think, 20, 22, 24 days in that context. It's still low historically. I would feel better about 30 to 45 days. But because of the affordability issues, like in the previous decade, we didn't have the affordability issues. It becomes somewhat of like a buyer's market. Now, I could make an argument. Is it really a buyer's market with mortgage rates this high and prices this high? No. Right? Buyers don't feel that, right? In that sense, we're not getting home prices declining in any meaningful fashion where buyers like, oh, that's a deal now or something. So the buyer-seller market, it's interesting. In a sense, what was, the 2010 to 2012 period was the buyer's market where we had low interest rates, lots of inventory, and prices falling. That's where you would, I would say, well, that was a real buyer's market there because all the variables were working together. But here, every buyer has to deal with high mortgage rates. And remember, with qualified mortgage, you can't buy what you don't qualify for, right? All these people goes, I'm not buying until, are you qualified to buy a house? No, so you're not, go. Move away. You're not part of this. You're not part of the conversation, right? So there's a lot of people that are needing rates to fall, come down to get to that total payment level. But God, it is such a good thing to see. It is such a good thing to get off of this because, I hated talking about the unhealthy housing market. I hated talking about the savagely unhealthy housing market. We did everything we can. We need higher rates to get inventory. And we're finally in the last year, 2024, right? This whole 5-year period that it's finally happening. So we will end this whole 5-year period of mine on a positive note that we're finally getting above. Now we're nowhere near normal still, but we're getting there. We're heading in that direction, which is good for housing in the long run.
On the tracker this week, every week you look at all these different variables. One of the things that you always look at is the percentage of homes that had to take a price cut before they sold. And about 1/3, so 33%, right, is normal. And we're all the way up to 39%. Do you think that that's, what does that say to you? Or is it not statistically significant?
It matters in the sense that when you have growing inventory and growing price cuts, that means you have softening in pricing going out in the seasonal strong period. And then you see the price cut percentage fall as inventory falls. What is different about this year than 2022 is that the slope, we always talk about the slope of the curve. 2022, see, here's the funny part. My 2022 price forecast was right on the dot. Not because I got it right, is because I was so wrong early on. And then mortgage rates went up to 7%. that it actually ended up hitting the price cutter. So that was a totally whiff call on my part, even though it was technically correct. Home prices were escalating out of control January, February, and March, right? We were going to run at 18 to 20% year over year price growth. Then mortgage rates went from 3 to 7%. Okay, so because the first few months were so hot in prices didn't decline enough to even get the year to be flat or negative. So we ended up the total year. But because we're working for, this is how I know there's people out there who don't know how to track housing home price data, because they actually thought home prices declined for the year. And that's just not the case. We were at a very elevated level. But going from 3 to 7% and having the fastest crash in home sales ever, that second half of 2022 was highly abnormal. Not only that, is that new listings data just tanked to all-time lows. Again, supply is a function of demand. If you have higher rates, no mortgage demand, and all of a sudden new listings are falling, you're getting the whole, four horsemen of the apocalypse coming at once, right? So that's why the second half of 2022 was a historical event. I believe it was just like crazy. And even with all that, we're like November 9th. Oh, I think we're going to just stop around 4 million. And we're still here around this kind of 4 million level. So we're not going anywhere in sales. We're not going up or we're not going down anywhere. We're just been stuck here since kind of the end of 2022. And we're here in July. Same thing. We just broke a little bit under 4 million. So it's one of these things where affordability now really matters more than any other time, because the credit markets are pretty normal and stable, right? You could get away with this in 2002 to 2005 because credit was so available. Anybody could buy a house even if they didn't qualify. Now it's not the case. You got to be legit. And but staying at those really, really low levels was not a good thing for housing, right? That was a whole team higher rates in 2021 and 2022 theme. But I said 5 years, we'll be okay as long as home prices don't grow above 23% for 5 years, 4.6% nominal. Of course, that got smashed by the second year. We're already up 30. So I lost that. And then the second part of the work is, and this is really big and key going into 2020, when the 10-year yield gets above 1.94%, meaning 4% plus mortgage rates, the housing market should naturally cool down because the rate of change. We went from 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, biggest crash in home sales ever, and we're still here. So that's how the model works. I'm just sticking to my model. It's just we're getting there. We have the 4-month supply now. This is the seasonal. We're getting to the seasonal peak period, and then we'll see the seasonal drop, which makes, again, a much more interesting 2025. But the fact that we're off those levels, the fact that everyone has more choices, that now if mortgage rates fell, I'm not worried anymore, right? I'm not worried about, 70% of the markets having multiple bids. Now, there are parts of the country that don't have a lot of inventory growth, and they're all savagely unhealthy still. But in general for the country, thank you, Texas and Florida, for just bringing the numbers up and getting some kind of normalcy out there.
So we just had our AI summit yesterday. As you know, we're recording this on Wednesday. That was on Tuesday, and had some great real estate folks there. I was talking with them backstage before they went on, and we were talking about the inventory, and they were like, thank God that we're having more inventory. And they said, hopefully too, to your point about, it's not exactly what we think of as a buyer's market, but with more inventory, then sellers, have more, they can come back down to earth on what they think they're going to sell their house for, right? Because they just
Are you
haven't kept
kidding
up.
me? You think sellers are going to ever come down to earth? What? What angel do you know that is like that? For those who don't understand, I have a running thing. Sellers are greedy. Sellers are always greedy. Everyone thinks their home is like, so it's
But
not
let's
the
also
most it's
say,
not the most functioning pricing system in the world. The builders, on the other hand, the builders are, I don't care about this house. I don't live here. That's not my, furniture or, my basement. They sell homes as a commodity. The buyer sellers market is humans, right? What do we always think? Like I always say, one of my gifts is that I try to take out emotion and ideological. You could accuse me of being very pro-America. That's what I get accused a lot. And I was like, good, please, every day, But outside of that, I try to stay kind of away. I usually attack like the extreme right and left, and they're a bunch of big crybabies. But here, buyers and sellers, the seller is an emotional. They think their house is worth. So
Not even
the,
that, Logan, but like if this is how we keep saying, right? This is how you build how you build wealth in America is through homeownership. Well, you don't do that by taking too low of a price on your house. You better cash in when you can.
no, but it's also, when you have more supply and demand is down, then the buyer seller market is when it tilts to one way, then agents have this is one of the beautiful parts about Altos research is that it's so unfair. We create these zip code data lines for our clients, and they literally have like over 60 things they can show people, and it makes their job a lot easier. Right, real estate investors love it because they look for pricing in investment areas. Wall Street likes it to kind of formulate with their economic models. But when you bring the supply and demand equilibrium into reality, right, then it becomes a more efficient system. So the only way you do that is that you take the human element out of the equation and bring the number element into the equation, right? But again, you humans are humans. There's going to be people that are going to say, I want X price, and they will sit there forever until it happens. And then there's other people that are a little bit more efficient, and they price their homes accordingly and they sell. Now, the days on market are still low historically. I think the all-time low is about 14 days.
Oh my
This is the
gosh.
NAR data. I think 22 days was the last report. So we're just in a better spot that if rates do fall, which is the next interesting topic, then at least we don't have to worry about, driving inventory all the way back down to all-time lows and then getting stuck back up again, which is the last thing I ever want to see ever again.
We do not want to see that again. Okay, let's talk about rates because how things have turned here recently. We've seen some data. We've seen some of those Fed presidents or ex-Fed presidents. That sounds like a band. Ex-Fed presidents.
We call them
Anyway,
the inversions.
the inversions.
Yes, the
Ah,
band, the inversions. Yeah.
getting the
Um,
band back together. So what are you hearing right now?
okay, so former Fed president of New York, the New York Fed, Dudley. This is the reality, Sarah. You might know a thing or two about this. Older men, when they leave power, sometimes they get bored and they say things that just to make a name for themselves.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Dudley,
Wait. Why would I know something about this?
because you're an elder Gen X, right? Right.
We
So
don't have those distinctions in Gen X. No, we do not. I am just Gen X. Thank you. Okay, continue.
I didn't call you baby boomer this time.
No, thank goodness.
Okay,
Okay.
so Dudley has made some really strange comments over the last 2 years. He's talking about, the stock market needs to crash. We need to create a recession. No. He was one of those kind of strange, hawkish ex-Fed presidents. And even like 7 weeks ago, he was talking about, the Fed funds rate's not high enough. The economy's growing too fast. Literally this morning, he's like, we got to cut rates now. Well, there's no point in waiting in September. I was like, oh, really? I was like, dude, homie, you're so off the map, How do you go from there to here, So the 2-year yield is now getting close to kind of the low levels that we saw early in the year. So the market is really starting to price in like 2 to 3 rate cuts now. And of course, things go up and down and crazy. But the one thing that's different now is that the labor market isn't tight anymore. Like they're all talking about it. And I think what's happening is that people that are like higher for longer and, we never need to cut rates, whatever, they're starting to realize if the labor market breaks on them, they don't want to be caught offside. So I think that's why Dudley came out today and said, well, we got to cut rates now. There's no point in waiting to September. Like, what? What coffee was he drinking today? So, it's this thing about, how we've always said paper, rock, scissors, labor over inflation. We just spoke with Guaranteed Rate and Coldwell Banker. We had 3,000 live people watch my presentation. And what I like to do is I like to show these inflation charts, and they're just like up, down, up, down. Oh my God, they all look up and they're down. So why aren't there any rate cuts? Because the Fed wants to attack the labor market, right? They've said it many times if people listen. And here we're getting to the point to where, boy, the jobless claims data, by the time this podcast comes out, we'll see how that goes. And then we have the Fed meeting next week. We have jobs week. So we're starting to get into a really interesting spot. And we're going to talk about, is the Fed going to cut rates next week on Friday's podcast that'll come out Monday. But for Dudley to come out and just flip on everyone, it was a shock because, and then I say, guys, he's an old guy and he wants attention. It's just like when Larry Summers talked about, we need 6% unemployment rate for 5 years to bring inflation down. No, we need 7.5% unemployment. Dude, you're just making stuff up, man. We need 10% for 1 year. Look at the growth rate of inflation. We have two handles on PCE, like for months now on the 12-month data. So I think we have talked about this. We want to see what the hawks say now, right? This is the last 3-4 weeks. We said, let's see what the hawks say, because dumbish people we know, but if the hawks start, he was a hawk. He was Hawkman. For Hawkman from Buck Rogers. Does anybody remember Hawkman from Buck Rogers? Right?
No,
I still don't know what.
No one remembers that because you're too old, Logan. No one has seen that show.
No, you guys got to watch Buck Rogers and then find Hawkman. And there's a little robot that goes beady, 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 beady. So that was the old days.
You've lost it, man.
But here, boy, for him to change, we're going to start. It's going to get really interesting on the verbiage of what the Fed talks about. And we'll go over that in the next podcast. But yeah, that kind of shook up the 2-year yield. 2-year yield went down. 10-year yield didn't really move too much, but it's getting more and more interesting.
It is, and that's exciting for people in our industry because my gosh, third year of lowest sales ever. That affects everybody. If you're in real estate, mortgage, title, appraisal, it's all not great. So we are ready to see a better end of 2024. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and again, when we look at the data, I've always said this. I remember CNBC asked me, they're like, "What do you think? What mortgage rate will change the marketplace?" And I said, "Well, if you want to grow sales just a tad, if you head down towards 6% and just stay there, you can bounce off these levels and hold them, right? Here, we showed that in 2022, we could bounce, but then rates went up to 8%. And this year, we never even got to 6%. We got to like almost 6.5%, and we bounced right up. So, but if you could get down towards 6, you got something. However, if you're talking about growth, you need sub 6% rates. If you're really talking about growth, you need rates there. And the difference now is that if the spreads get better and the 10-year yield falls and the Fed is cutting rates, you have the double whammy effect. Because if the spreads were normal, mortgage rates are under 6% today. Just normal spreads. You don't need the 10-year yield. That's slow dance. That's slow dance that we're going to do on stage one day, Sarah. We don't even need that to get sub 6%. We just need normal spreads. But now, the 10-year yield could go down, then you got something that's a little bit more workable out here.
Listen,
but
if we were in the 5s, I mean, just the psychological difference of like being 7.5 and then, in very recent memory, this time last year, not this time, but last year getting up towards 8%. I mean, in the 5s, you're going to have a lot of demand.
Yeah. So regarding that, of course, now that we're mid part of 2024, everyone could see why I've talked about this 4 million level, right? We're just here, and we've had elevated rates now for over 2 years, but we don't really break down. And when rates go down, we go a little bit higher, but we can't break out of this either way. So we're missing again about 4.2 to 4.7 million home buyers that would normally be here if everything was normal, right? Let's assume home prices just grew 3% every year and mortgage rates were like 4.25% to 5.5%. We'd have more sales right now than we would have than rates getting down low and prices escalating out of control. But if you could get sub 6%, the builders can show you that you can get growth. I mean, the new home sales it went lower again, but elevated rates are really starting to become even a problem there. But Man, I hate the pent-up demand theory. I've never liked it. I thought it was a marketing gimmick. But I could actually show that there's just literally people that would normally be buying right now that are just not there right now because remember that total house of cost of housing prices, the amount of money you borrow, property taxes, insurance, you got to put it all that. Housing inflation is very similar to what we had in the early 80s. But even in the early 80s, as rates started to go down, demand started to pick up, and we take it from there. But so far, we haven't had that 6% rate push going down there. But we'll see what happens in the second half of 2024. Of course, now there's more rate cut talk, there's more labor. But again, paper, rock, scissors. The labor data is actually more important than the Fed rate cut, right? So because the bond market will get ahead of the Fed if they think it's weakness, right? If they believe in it, they go ahead with it. Now, if you get the spreads better, that's a double whammy effect. That's what I'm looking for. You can get those two things together, then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, finally. Okay, let's go,
Yes.
you know.
This would be amazing. Amazing. Logan, thanks for breaking it all down for us. We will talk again in a few days when we have some more labor data and we'll see what rates do then. So thank you so much for being on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I encourage everyone, Google Buck Rogers, right? It's hilarious. They're awesome.
Is this going to be one of those things like you forget about how bad something was or inappropriate until like you watch it like 20 years later and you're like,
What, are you
that's
saying the
bad.
Chart Daddy doesn't know what good TV was back in the days?
I have no idea if you know what good TV is. I don't know. Can you be trusted? Okay, let's let our audience weigh in on that. Look at Buck Rogers and you let me know. Is Logan to be trusted in this way? I have no idea what your taste in movies or TV is like. So
Oh, trust me, people will be laughing. The humor is great.
laughing. Okay, good. Okay. All right, Logan, we'll talk soon. Thanks.